church needs to be fighting on the front lines for our family.
The Fresh Church Podcast.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Fresh Church Podcast, a place where we take innovative ingredients with time-honored disciplines and we fuse them together to create a fresh ministry model that actually works. If we haven't met, hi, I'm Pastor Tony Kensinger. Do me a favor and give us a follow. Every week we do our podcast, and I'd love it if you'd be part of the conversation. So on today's show, I want to ask the question, why is the church family so important? You know, I have two incredible parents. I love them so much. And what tells me that I have two incredible parents? Well, it turned out two pretty incredible kids. My sister and I, we love God. We're going full speed. I mean, we've probably got our quirks, but our parents did a good job raising us. But the true testimony in this is actually the way that my parents raised us. You see, when you look at my family history, the heritage that we come from, we shouldn't have the success story that we have. My sister and I should have more challenges, issues. I mean, you look at all the statistics, the odds were stacked against us. But we won because of the church family. And so let me just give you a taste, a little bit of what my past looks like. I'm from Montana, a small town out in the middle of nowhere, kind of a poor area. And so let me tell you a little bit about my dad. My dad actually had 15 brothers and sisters. Can you believe that? Is that a big family or what? But it's a little dysfunctional, okay? Let me kind of explain. My dad's father, my grandpa, well, he was old. He actually fought in World War I. Yeah, World War I. Okay, during the Prohibition, he was like taking alcohol across the Canadian border. Like he could have gotten all kinds of trouble. That's the kind of past we came from. He was a homesteader. He had a little logging thing set up for a while, and then a small lumber mill, and just kind of worked through life. And he was married, and his first wife, they had 5 kids. And on the 5th child, she passed away in childbirth. And as a single man, my grandpa raised all 5 of those kids. He raised them, got them married, and off on their own. And as the 5th child got married, he fell in love with my grandma, who, by the way, was the same age as his kids. Kind of awkward, right? Okay, now my grandma, she had been married before in an abusive situation. She came with 2 kids. And so when he married, they came with 2, and together they had 3 more. That makes an older 5 kids, and now the middle 5 kids. 2 of them with a different dad than the other 3. My dad was the only son born to my grandpa and my grandma. And then while he was in high school, his dad got old and passed away. And it was hard. It was hard dealing with that as a father who wasn't necessarily engaged in his life and went to activities with him. His father loved his mother, but he wouldn't exactly call it a typical relationship. Now, my grandma, she was a hard worker. Okay, she worked hard every day of her life. She was a hunter. She did all the Montana things. Okay, she wasn't a pretty girl. She did what had to be done to get the job done. Now, after Grandpa passed away, a few years later, my grandmother married again. And this gentleman came with 5 kids. So the older 5, the middle 5, and the younger 5. Okay, and most of those kids were still in high school. They were still growing up as they got married. On top of that, we found out in the midst of there somewhere when my grandpa was in World War I, there may have been another child in Europe, but we've never made that connection. So 15 brothers and sisters from all kinds of different areas, if you will. My dad actually has nieces and nephews that are older than him. His sister married his cousin, and they're really technically not related, even though they have the same last name. Like, it's just a weird kind of whatever, and everybody in town knows their family. Then come along my mother. Now, my mother, she also came from a dysfunctional family. You see, when Grandpa and Grandma got married, they both came with kids as well. My grandfather on that side, he was married and had 4 kids. And he was actually came over the Canadian border as a small child. He immigrated into America. Previously, they had been Americans. They had been train robbers. What a great past, right? Fled to Canada, then came back again. He got married, He had a drinking issue. He had a bad mouth. He ended up in prison over a couple different times. 4 kids in the midst of that divorce, and honestly, those 4 kids didn't want a lot to do with Grandpa. Grandma came with 1 child as well. She came from the East Coast. She put an ad in one of those little magazines back then. Like now we would do the internet. Back then in the back of a magazine, she put an ad in there looking for somebody. They pen-palled back and forth. She got on a train, went across the country, got off the train, and married my grandpa the same day. April 1st, by the way. Okay, my grandparents got married on April Fool's Day. There were 5 kids and the older there. 4 on one with the other. They had 5 kids. My mom was the oldest of those 5 kids. Then came along 4 boys after that. Now that family had all kinds of challenges as well. They were poor. They were in a northern city growing up in the midst of the 60s, and they were in a poor community such that my mom was one of the only white children in that school. Okay, it was a segregated school, and she was one of the only white children in a black school. Through lots of different situations, health issues, drinking issues, all different problems. At one point, the state took all 5 of those kids away and they split them up into 4 different foster homes. During that time, my mom was in a rough foster home, but honestly, the best of the 4 different ones. Abuse occurred, violence occurred. And while she was there, not being treated well, she met a youth leader who invited her to church. And in the midst of that, a family that didn't know God, she came to know Jesus. And she got to get connected with a church family. Now, as the years went by, her brothers made all kinds of different choices. One of them ended up actually being one of the most wanted from the KGB. He was an assassin. Another one, he was a drug addict with all kinds of problems with that. Another one had health issues and couldn't work a lot, had some challenges there. Another one died of AIDS. I mean, you've got all kinds of different elements within that family. And my mother met my father, and she led him to the Lord, and they got married. And with 25 siblings, they had a dysfunctional family, but they decided that that wasn't the family that they wanted to raise children in. So where do you look for help? When everything is pointed against you, when the world's odds, when the statistics are against you, where do you go for help? Well, my mom knew that when she was in one of the worst seasons of her life, it was a youth leader that spoke life into her, and a youth group, and a youth pastor at a church. And so my parents right away got connected into the local church. And it took them a couple churches before they found that place that became family for them. And I remember as a young child, 2, 3, 4 years old, I remember people being in our house. And a lot of times it wasn't family, because family came with baggage, came with a lot of challenges. And most of the time, they judged my parents because they felt judged. Okay, well, you don't smoke or drink anymore, therefore you probably judge us for doing it, so we don't want to spend time with you. It became hard during family traditions and holidays, spending time with family, and we always kind of felt like the odd ones out because we weren't participating in the same things that they were doing. But week to week, it was the church family that we spent time with. It was a church family that celebrated birthdays. It was a church family that gave me my first dog, my first puppy that I got to have. It was church family that did things together when it was time to go hunting, when it was time to go get wood. Even though all those siblings lived in the area for the most part, it was church family. And I remember even in elementary, we would go on vacations, we would go do things, but we always came back in time for church because that was our family tradition. That's when we did things together as a family. And there were so many families over those years that spoke into my life, spoke into our family's life. I mean, I remember Mike and Jeanette and Thad and Rebecca and brother and sister Robbins, and the way they were like another set of grandparents almost, and, the way they spoke into us, and the Rebens and the Batuziks, and so many families that were our church family. That when times got tough, we knew who to talk to. When finances got tough, I remember that there were families in the church that would give us food at times. And there were also times we'd bring food to them because we were family. I never once remember one of my actual family members of the 25 ever coming along and blessing us in that manner. Maybe they did. I just don't remember. But I do remember the church family. And as my sister and I grew up in that environment, that's where my parents learned that loving God, putting Him first, putting the church first, created a church family for us. Despite all the dysfunction of everything going on around us, we had a secure family. And those relatives So many of them now have a relationship with God. They have a relationship with Jesus, and they go to church and they're involved in things, and their families have changed over the years where they look up to my parents, even though they weren't the oldest ones or the youngest ones. They look up to them on what they've done with their kids, the example that they have set. All the rest of them have different examples. My sister and I turned out okay because my parents realized the most important family was the church family. So why is a church family important? Because you never know what families are coming through your door, what challenges they are going through, what statistics, what culture has stacked against them. They need renewed hope. They need a transformation of their mind. They need a new family. And now, as the modern family is more dysfunctional than ever, it's time for the church to do something about it. We need to make sure that we are making a strong church family. I remember growing up, there was an old song we used to sing that, I'm so glad I'm a part of the family of God. What's that mean? I'm part of the family of God. Well, look around. We're all one big family. So let's look at some of the current statistics that are out there. Let's look at some of the people that are currently attending our church today. Brandon Gale in 2017 put out these statistics. 1 in 2 children in the United States will live with a single parent at some point in their lives. 50% of kids at some point in their lives are only going to live with one of their parents. 1 in 8 children today are born to a teen mother. 1 in 3 children today are born to parents that are unmarried, although they may be cohabitating. 1 out of every 25 kids in the United States does not live with either one of their parents. More than 2/3 of children today are living in what can be considered a non-traditional family environment. 34% of children today are living with unmarried parents. That's up from 9% in 1960 and 19% in 1980. How much more are those numbers going to increase? 1 out of 3 parents say they don't spend enough time with their kids. Well, you can't have family as an island. We've got to work together. We've got to come together. The church needs to be fighting on the front lines for our family. You know what? There's a lot of causes within this religion organization we call the church. There are a lot of things that are important. I believe in missions. I believe in holding on to the values in America and helping people to make right decisions in some of their voting aspects. I believe in studying the Word of God and having Bible classes on it. I believe in great worship and great elements. But you know what I believe in? I believe in family. That's why in Fresh, it's one of our core values. And it comes first. Family, relationship, experience, safety, and hope. It's about family. And when you make a place for the family, life change occurs. And so you'll hear me talk a lot of times about giving resources to family, providing a place for families in church, getting families to volunteer. But today I want to go a step farther with this, that as the church, we are the family. That for those kids, they might not be your kids, but you know what? You're their uncle, you're their aunt, maybe you're their grandparent. Maybe in some ways, you're their mother or their father helping to step in where there's a void. Are you being part of their family? Are you engaging them? You know, I'll never forget the first time I heard this quote from the book Married People by Ted Lowe and Doug Fields. Says this: one of the best things we can give kids are married parents. And when I heard that, I thought, surely that's going to offend somebody. I mean, we have a lot of families that have only one parent present. Yeah, but you know what? I'm not afraid of offending anymore. I want to make sure we help people understand, you know what? The statistics on kids that come from broken homes is scary. So let's keep the homes from being broken. And as a family, we can come along beside them and help. And maybe they don't have a father or a mother or a grandparent or an uncle, an aunt, or a sibling. Maybe they come from all kinds of messed up situations. Maybe grandparents are taking care of them. But we're family, and we're in this with them, and we know them by name, and we celebrate their birthdays, and we celebrate their life, and we're involved in everything that they do. We are to be different. We're sons and daughters of God, joint heirs with Jesus. We're all part of the same family. We're Abraham's descendants. I love reading through the Old Testament. When one Jewish tribe would get attacked, the others would come and help them. They're family. They helped each other out. We're going to help each other out. We're going to fight for each other. We're going to encourage each other because we're in it together. Remember Jesus, his mother and his brothers were coming, and the disciples were like, your mother and brothers are here. And Jesus is like, look around. These are all my brothers and sisters and mothers. Okay, we're all family. Jesus knew that. We're all family. Look at Acts chapter 2. I mean, Acts chapter 2, that's where the Holy Spirit comes down and the disciples, the 120 get filled with the Holy Spirit. And then Peter goes out on the streets and he starts preaching and thousands of people get saved. And then look at the end of Acts chapter 2. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. Let me read that again, verse 44. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold their property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Praising God and enjoying the favor of the people because they shared between themselves like family. And the Lord added to their number, because people get excited when family is present. When you show your church is a family church, lives get changed. Well, how do we do that, Pastor Tony? Hey, we've got all kinds of resources to help you out with that. Freshman.org. We've got labs in there that will help you with the family focus and the element on that aspect. But let me give you some tips right now that are going to help you out. Okay. Spend some time together with meals with the people in your church. When church gets over, do you like to go out and eat? Invite somebody to come with you. Maybe pick up the check. Or if you can't, let them pay for it. They're probably going somewhere also. Let your kids play together. Let your families connect together. Go beyond just, hey, good to see you at church. How's it going? I had a conversation this last Sunday with a guy who he's got to be over 70. And we spent 15 minutes talking about weed eating. That's right, weed eating. Why? Because that's what family talks about. Hey, let's talk about mowing our yard, cutting the weeds, hanging out together. Okay, you know what? We now have a plan that I'm going to come over and help him weed eat, because I realized it takes him 3 hours to weed eat because it's so exhausting for him. We're family. If I was his son, I'd go help him out. I help out my in-laws. I'm going to go help out this guy because we're family. What about holidays? What about holidays where you do things together with the other people in your church, more than just Sunday and maybe Wednesday night, where you talk to people, you find out what's going on. You actually have conversations. You spend time with the people at church. You find out their names. You've probably talked to them 20 times. It's okay to say, by the way, I'm sorry, I've never asked your name and I've never told you mine. Hi, I'm Tony. What's your name? And then remember it, write it down. Okay, help yourself, because they're now family. You need to know their names. You know, we also talk about family traditions, and part of that is, I would say, getting people from your church involved in those traditions, getting people involved where if they don't have anybody to go hang out with, they go do that. And that's in some of our other podcasts. You can find that there. Let me also encourage you to spend time with your staff as well, the family that they have. You know, so often staff families are the loneliest. Depending on what your church looks like, may have moved from a different geographic location to come be a part of your church family. They don't have any relatives around. And a lot of times we do a really good job of moving them in, and we help them get settled and everything, and then we let them be. In the midst of letting them be, they don't have anybody to help babysit their kids. They don't know what places to shop at, what places to go. Where do you go to watch a movie? What's the best theater in town? They don't do family things with others. You know, after church, go eat with somebody, go hang out at somebody's house, invite them over for a barbecue. And staff with staff, let's connect that together. Lead pastors, spend time with your staff family, not just your staff, because they are part of your church family. You know, I somehow expected when I became a pastor that my world was going to be more like the way it was when I grew up. You see, as I was growing up, I was involved in church. My family did church. We did everything church, and the families of our church, we spent time together. So when I grew up and I started having kids, I thought I was going to be that way when I went to a church. Wasn't that way. Holidays were the worst. If we didn't travel to go see family, we sat at home alone. Independence Day, 4th of July. What do? You know, Labor Day, everybody's out on a boat. I never once got invited out on a boat. There were times that my family didn't get included in things, birthday parties, family celebrations. The school would do Grandparents' Day. I finally had to go find people, will you be our adopted grandparents? Because they didn't feel like the church was their family. And I saw some things happen that honestly hurt my kids. I saw where my son was actually assaulted by our youth pastor and was basically told, yeah, you need to go to counseling to work through that. And nothing was resolved. I saw my daughter who was called the B word by our music pastor, okay, who was threatened at one point, hey, if you don't do things the way that I want you to, we're going to fire your dad. That was me, by the way. That's not family. Lead pastors love those kids, especially staff kids. When I look at the requirements for being a pastor in 1 Timothy, it says that he must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him, and he must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. Because if anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? With the implication being, as a pastor, I take care of my family because I'm in charge of God's family, the church. And so we look at this criteria as, hey, do you have a good family? Are you taking your kids? Do your kids love and respect you and honor you? Are you loving and respecting and honoring the other kids in your church, pastor? Are you loving on the other staff that's in there? And are you teaching your staff to do that? Are you teaching your leaders, your board members and such to love on those kids? Do your elders know the names of staff kids? Do they know the name of the elders' kids? Are we building family? Over this past year, I've had the privilege of being a part of the church. In the season of life we're in right now, I spend a lot of time visiting churches, doing coaching and consulting. I'm not on staff at a church on the weekend. And so I get to attend and volunteer at a local church here in town. And for this past year, we've been attending a church that our in-laws love to help them get squared away, build family and connection accordingly, and honestly, enjoying time with the in-laws. And I'm so thankful for Pastor Ken and Susan because they showed me what it means to have family at church. So my daughter, she was in a school production. She was in a show choir. And she got up and did a performance, and she had a solo in the midst of that, as well as she was in a trio that sang. And it was a long concert. It was a 2.5-hour concert. And Pastor Ken and Susan came. They had a funeral that day. They had a reception afterwards. They literally came. He came in a suit and tie. She came in a dress directly from the church. It was an evening concert that was a long time. They grabbed fast food on the way. They said they wouldn't miss it because they wanted to be there for my daughter. 25 years of doing ministry, and I never had a lead pastor come to one of my kids' events. Not special sporting events, special concerts. They didn't come to graduation or even graduation parties. And this church showed me what it's like to be a family. So when your niece, when your daughter, when your cousin has a concert, you go and you support them and you encourage them. And our pastors were there encouraging my daughter. That's what church family is. My 15-year-old, she'll remember that. My older 2 kids, they noticed as well. We're a church family. Now I know you can't make it to everything. You can't do everything. You've got a lot on your plate. Let's make it a priority to make family important. See, that's how family works. So our church needs to be a family. We've got families that are broken, single moms, single dads, blended families that are working through all of the challenges of life, coming out of all kinds of histories and past. I don't need to give you the specifics. The modern family is broken. Maybe we need some more traditional family. Regardless of which, we need to start fighting for families. The church needs to be a place where people know my family needs help. I can go to the church. They're going to be there for me. Because the church isn't about a building. It's about the people inside. And John 13:35 says this, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. The New Living Translation says this, your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. Our families need you. Church leader, church pastor, director, whatever your title is, child of God. Connect with the other families in your community, in your church. The church family is one of the most important things right now. Make it a priority in your church.